to hold a press conference shortly. We will bring you the latest. The mother of a missing boy claims her calculating ex brainwashed her son, who she believes is still alive and hiding overseas. A crackdown on swarming dirt bike riders pulling donuts and wheel stands and intimidating other Auckland drivers. The police switch on to electric vehicles trialling their first plug-in patrol car. And tensions boil over at a bunny cafe slammed as a torture chamber for abandoned rabbits. And the udder way for cafes cutting down on plastic waste. You can watch us live on the RNZ website, Facebook and Freeview Channel 50.
RNZ News at 5, Talofa Lava, I'm Evie Ashton. It's understood the woman who died in a home invasion overnight in the Northland town of Kaikohe was elderly. The police have launched a homicide investigation and are still looking for the intruder. Local Colleen Brennan says the victim was known in the community and was an elderly woman.
I've just heard that it was one of our local queers, one of our old queers, so her children and her grandchildren will be devastated.
Far North Mayor Moko Te Pania says as a resident of the town himself, it's come as a shock. He says Kaikohe is a tight-knit community and is encouraging anyone concerned for their safety to speak to others. Auckland Mayor Wayne Brown has raised the hackles of his councillors again by forwarding them copies of emails, including one from a supporter that called them, and please excuse my language, dipshits. Mr Brown wants council to sell its airport shares to plug the council's $325 million budget deficit. Kay Albert reports.
One councillor who RNZ spoke to says sending on the negative emails was unbecoming of the mayor. The email drop comes after Wayne Brown spent part of a briefing yesterday accusing the councillors of being financially illiterate. He also singled out 4 who had signed a pledge not to raise rates by more than inflation and who are against selling the shares. The councillor says sending the email suggests the mayor is getting desperate to gain support for his budget proposal.
The police formally warned Cabinet Minister Jan Tinetti for breaching electoral advertising rules during last year's Tauranga by-election. Ms Tinetti's campaign team made social media posts encouraging people to vote for her on polling day in breach of the rules. The Prime Minister says the government won't intervene to prevent several hundred proposed job cuts proposed by University of Otago to save $60 million. Chris Hipkins says a decline in enrolment has pressured the university's books.
The universities make their own decisions about how they manage their finances, so it's not something that we can intervene with as a government. But I would note that we've given the universities in this year's budget the biggest increase in funding they'll get it next year, but they'll get the biggest increase in funding that they've had in over 20 years.
The university says government funding doesn't match rising costs. The US will avert an unprecedented debt default after the Senate this afternoon passed legislation lifting the national debt ceiling.
This vote, the yeas are 63, the nays are 36. The 60-vote threshold having been achieved, the bill is passed.
The Treasury Department had warned it would be unable to pay all its bills this coming Monday. President Joe Biden will make an address tonight concerning the deal. It'll come after the president earlier fell badly at a military graduation ceremony in Colorado. Jessica Parker of the BBC has more.
Joe Biden had been standing for about an hour and a half, shaking hands with individual cadets. Then, as he walked along the stage, he tripped on what is said to have been a sandbag. Joe Biden has previously dismissed concerns about his age, suggesting voters should just watch him in action. But this very visible stumble may be used by critics or political opponents to reinforce the idea that the Democratic incumbent of the White House is too old to run for re-election.
A spokesperson for abuse survivors says a church's new application to the courts to be excluded from the abuse inquiry is immoral. The Jehovah's Witnesses Church is seeking a judicial review, arguing it's outside the scope of the Royal Commission. Shane Meechan of J-Dubs for Justice says it won't work.
They don't care about the ones that have been abused. They only care about their name. It's a kick in the guts. We knew it was coming. That's what they do all the time. They have not succeeded in being able to squash the commissions from including them.
A church spokesperson says it doesn't and never has taken children, young people or vulnerable adults into care. Ukraine claims to have repelled the latest wave of Russian air attacks. Officials say defences appeared to have shot down more than 30 missiles and drones. To sport now, and there's plenty on the line for both the Blues and the Highlanders in their final regular season Super Rugby match in Auckland tonight. A win for the Blues will guarantee them a home quarter-final, while the Highlanders need to win to cement a playoff spot. Lose and they'll need other results this weekend to go their way. In basketball, the Denver Nuggets have beaten the Miami Heat 104-93 in Game 1 of the best-of-7 NBA Finals. Game 2 was on Monday. Meanwhile, Tall Blacks stalwart Tom Abercrombie has announced his retirement from international basketball, having played 110 games for New Zealand. Athletics New Zealand says it wouldn't disqualify an athlete for a victory celebration, as officials in the US have done. Sprinter Brodie Buffington gave a victory salute a few metres from the finish at the Maryland High School State Champs and was disqualified for breaching code of conduct rules. Athletics New Zealand's Hamish Meacham says displays of emotion aren't discouraged in Aotearoa.
We've seen it all the way from Olympic finals all the way down to, kids athletics at our Colgate Games when a kid crosses the line first in one of their heats or one of their finals, they'll often just instinctively put their hands up to celebrate. Big smile across the face. Fantastic to see.
And 250,000 more tickets for the upcoming Women's Football World Cup in New Zealand and Australia will be released next week. That's the news.
Tomorrow morning, the origins of life and the universe with Thomas Hertog, who once told Stephen Hawking he was wrong. Bold call. Former lawyer turned playwright Susie Miller on taking the West End and Broadway by storm. And beloved star of Downton Abbey and Afterlife, Dame Penelope Wilton, with a new road movie with an old age twist. And a Dane determined to sail right around Papua New Guinea or die trying. Join me, Colin Peacock, in for Kim Hill, Saturday from 8 a.m. on RNZ National.
We're funded through New Zealand On Air. You're with Lisa Owen next on Checkpoint. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Friday. Northland, Auckland and Coromandel, also Bay of Plenty. Partly cloudy, isolated showers, becoming more widespread and possibly heavy for a time tomorrow afternoon. Waikato to Manawatu, including the central high country, cloudy periods. A few showers turning to rain for a time tomorrow, briefly heavy. Gisborne to Waidadapa, generally fine, but the odd shower tomorrow. Horowhenua to Wellington, also Nelson and Marlborough, fine spells. A few showers, possibly heavy about western Nelson, clearing tomorrow morning. Canterbury, mainly fine with high cloud, but rain near the divide today. Bulla to Fiordland, periods of rain or showers with some heavy and possibly thundery falls. Otago and Southland, showers about Southland and Clutha, possibly heavy and thundery. Elsewhere, rain for a time this evening, then the odd shower tomorrow. And Chatham Islands, cloudy periods with a few showers tomorrow. It's 7 minutes past 5. I'll have traffic news and headlines for you at 20 past 5.
Nā mihi iwi, tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai, ki Checkpoint I tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. An elderly woman on a dialysis machine has been killed in a home invasion in Kaikohe overnight. Residents of the small Northland town of Kaikohe today woke up to the news the woman, who was well known in the community, had died after a struggle with other people living at the house and an intruder. Police have launched a homicide investigation, but no arrests have been made yet. Now, the police are due to hold a media briefing shortly and will have the latest developments throughout the program. But first, this from Emma Stanford in Northland.
Kaikohe residents are reeling after an elderly woman died following a struggle with an intruder in her own home. Police were called to the property on Tarairi Street before midnight after reports of an intruder. Local woman Colleen Brennan says the victim was known in the community.
I've just heard that it was one of our local queers, one of our old queers, so her children and her grandchildren will be devastated.
She says the incident has turned the tight-knit community upside down.
Absolutely gutted that it's happening in our town. This does not happen in our towns. Our community will come together and pull together and, for the family that it's affected, so because that's how we are in Kaikohe. When in doubt, we all come together.
Some neighbours say they heard screaming late last night, and the thought that those responsible are still out there has them terrified. One Tarairi Street resident who has lived there for more than 3 decades says the area's not as quiet as it once was.
We've had those incidents with gang things and that not that long ago. That was quite frightening, but that's settled. But it's just not the way it used to be, you know, neighbours looking after neighbours, and hasn't got that same kind of support.
Community organisation Te Arahu provides employment and educational opportunities in Kaikohe. Its trustee, Kerry Hilton, says despite the tragedy, he still feels safe living there.
When stuff goes wrong, then that's the stuff gets put out there, so there's a lot of concern around that, and there'll be some people I'm sure are quite concerned. Personally, we're not concerned for our safety at all.
Far North Deputy Mayor Kelly Stratford says although the community is in shock, people are rallying together in their grief.
The community are very shocked. It hasn't happened in a long time. You get some flurries all across, you know, every single community in New Zealand, but this is an awful event.
Kelly Stratford says support is available for anyone who needs it.
And as reported, police have launched a homicide investigation. They are due to hold a media briefing shortly, and we will bring you the latest developments throughout the program. It is 10 minutes after 5. Kia amo tonu mai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Swarming dirt bike riders causing havoc on Auckland roads will be a target of police this long weekend. A special squad will be using the Eagle helicopter, traffic and surveillance cameras to crack down on the reckless riders who appear to be using social media to organise street gatherings, intimidating and harassing other drivers. Police fear someone could be killed and are appealing for people to help them trace the motorbikes. County's Manukau Area Commander Inspector Rod Honan says riders are completely reckless.
They're swarming in large numbers, driving dangerously and disrupting our traffic in Tamaki Makaurau. So the things we're seeing is wheel stands, doing donuts and skids, blocking roads, just really disruptive to all our roads and completely unsafe.
Is it intimidating behaviour for other motorists, and are they putting other motorists in danger?
It is intimidating, and when they do swarm, we get a number of calls from the public because they are intimidated. And I've driven the roads myself and seen it firsthand when I've been off duty, so I can understand the public's dismay. But what I'd like to say to the public is we do take this seriously. We do have an investigation team out this weekend that will be looking to disrupt their activity, but I'd also like to ask the community if they can help us as well. They know where these vehicles are being stored. They're our eyes and ears, and if we're able to find evidence of some of these where these vehicles are being stored, then if we have the right evidence, then we'll do our best to get them off the roads.
So you use the word swarm, so it sounds like there's a bunch of them. What kind of numbers are they travelling in?
That depends from weekend to weekend or day to day. So our mission in this operation is to disrupt the biggest swarm from starting. So what we're trying to do is target the smaller swarms, which before they become the biggest swarm. So and that's where our community come into play. So I'm asking our community from the county's Manukau district to help us out.
So how do they communicate with each other? They're obviously gathering together, gathering momentum and getting into bigger groups. How organised is it? How do they talk to each other?
From what I believe, they are using social media platforms, as all young people do these days.
And are they wearing safety gear?
Sometimes not. You've seen from previous footage that we've had in other operations that some are wearing helmets and protective clothing. Others are choosing to ride in shorts and singlets with a beanie, which is clearly not a safe thing to do.
And the areas, mainly out south, is it, in Auckland?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, various areas in the county's Manukau Policing District.
And why do you think that is, Inspector? Where are they coming from?
They come from all over. What we have found is we can't pin it down to a particular suburb or area. The swarming has become popular with our particularly our young men, and they're coming from all over the place.
So how did the swarming first start? I mean, how did it build to this? And for how long has it been going on?
I think it started in America, and it's been sensationalised with the various social media platforms. So our young folk have taken on board, and what you're seeing here is a replication of what's happening around the world at the moment.
Is it kind of taken from some of those movies where there are lots of police chases and fast-moving vehicles that have been popularised?
It's hard to say, but there's so much coverage of it on social media these days that just about every platform that you can think of has some form of video of swarming on it.
Are you able to confiscate the vehicles after the fact, the bikes?
Absolutely, and that's part of what we're about to look at as well. We want to hold the riders to account, and we're going to continue to use all available avenues such as enforcement, including the impounding vehicles in real time and post issuing infringements and arresting people for any driving offences that we can detect.
What would your message be to these people who are doing this?
Don't do it. It's unsafe to you, to the members of the public, and by doing it, it's doing nothing for the temperament and the confidence of other road users on the road.
Quite simply, someone could end up dead, couldn't they?
Absolutely, and that's what we're trying to prevent. Deaths and serious injury on our roads is not acceptable. So what we're trying to do is prevent that by happening, and that's why our operation team and the operational staff will be focusing on prevention rather than the aftermath.
Yeah, I imagine it's quite difficult for you guys because dirt bikes are pretty manoeuvrable. You can nip down an alley, hide away somewhere. That must add a different level to your operation.
And that's the beauty of our police helicopter Eagle. We have the most high-tech camera system on Eagle. So even if they're out of sight, we have heat source. There's other ways.
And that's Inspector Rod Honan. A man who is controlling, calculating and determined. That's how Fiona Liu described her former partner, John Beckenridge, who she is convinced brainwashed her son Mike and staged a murder-suicide to escape the country. John Beckenridge and his 11-year-old stepson disappeared in March 2015, and later his car was found at the bottom of a cliff in the Catlins, but no bodies were found. The coroner's hearing is to establish whether the pair are dead or missing, and it heard its final evidence today. Anna Sargent was in court.
In a statement read to the hearing by the lawyer assisting the coroner, Rebecca Jordan, Mike's mother, Fiona Liu, says she believes the night before her son disappeared 8 years ago, he knew he was leaving her.
Mike had acted a little nervous and a little bit different. His emotions seemed off, and it looked like he was acting. When I spoke with him, Mike's face was different, like he was trying to hide something. On the morning of the 13th of March 2015, Mike's behaviour was normal. I think he knew of the plan.
Ms. Liu says when she won custody of Mike, it angered her son in a way she hadn't seen before. She says her son and Mr. Beckenridge were inseparable and Mike followed his lead. Fiona Liu believes her former partner brainwashed Mike and staged their deaths on the cliff top to escape the country with him. She is convinced the pair are alive and hiding overseas. In her statement, Ms. Liu spoke of John's final text messages.
John included messages to me in that final batch. In his messages, John referred to Mike, saying, "No going back." I believe Mike said that, as that is what they were both thinking. They had made it that far, and there was no going back.
However, the police view is that Mr. Beckenridge lacked the ability, both the planning and the access to money, to successfully fake a murder-suicide, and he and Mike are dead. Sergeant Dave Kennelly told the hearing the police found no evidence the clifftop scene was a staged event, and evidence points to them being in the car when it went over the cliff. Fiona Liu says her former partner was not suicidal. She says Mr. Beckenridge wanted her to suffer, but not by ending his and Mike's life, just by removing Mike from her life.
If John wanted to die, it didn't need to be complicated. It could be quite simple. The complicated car over the cliff plan is part of the bigger plan, because if John wanted to kill them, he would have done it in a much faster way.
Coroner Marcus Elliott will reserve his decision and wait for closing submissions from the parties.
It is 18 minutes after 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. We would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the program tonight, homai or whakaaro. You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or the email address checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Evie is here with the headlines. Ko Evie anō tēnei.
The woman who died after a struggle during a home invasion in the far north town of Kaikohe late last night was an elderly pensioner. The police, who were called to the Taraire Street property after reports of an intruder, have launched a homicide investigation. The intruder is yet to be found. Auckland Mayor Wayne Brown has again raised the hackles of councillors by forwarding them copies of emails, including one in which the sender calls them, quote, dipshits. One councillor spoken to by RNZ says sending on such emails is unbecoming of the mayor. The US Senate has passed bipartisan legislation backed by President Joe Biden that lifts the government's debt ceiling, averting what would have been an historic first-ever default. With this legislation already passed by the House of Representatives, the statutory limit on federal borrowing is suspended until January the 1st, 2025. The police formally warned Cabinet Minister Jan Tinetti for breaching electoral advertising rules during last year's Tauranga by-election. On polling day, her campaign team breached the rules with social media posts, encouraging people to vote for her. Ms Tinetti says she apologised at the time and has taken steps to prevent it happening again. And Prime Minister Chris Hipkins says the government won't intervene to prevent several hundred job cuts proposed by the University of Otago. Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic, all looking normal in the main centres ahead of the long weekend on the roads. In South Canterbury, a strong wind warning has been in place all day on State Highway 8 between Omarama and Fairlie. Our next traffic news and headlines are at 5:40.
Thank you, Evie. The final round of the Super Rugby Pacific season kicks off tonight in Auckland with plenty to play for. The Blues host the 8th-placed Highlanders, who are clinging on to the last playoff spot. We're joined by sports reporter Felicity Reid. Felicity, what's the playoff equation looking like?
Well, going into this round, 11 of the 12 teams are actually still in the running to make the playoffs. The Highlanders, who you mentioned there, are on the cusp. They're in a 5-way battle for the last 2 playoff spots. So currently in 8th, if they can get an upset against the Blues at what's likely to be a very wet Eden Park tonight, they could move into 7th. But a loss for the Southerners wouldn't necessarily end their season, but they'd be relying on other results going their way to keep them around next week. For the Blues, though, this is a little bit of a different picture. They're in 3rd, could get into 2nd or fall to 5th, which is unlikely but possible. They've already got a home quarterfinal in their sights, and a bonus point win tonight could get them a home semi-final. So as we say, it's plenty to play for there. But for the other New Zealand teams, the Chiefs have already locked away that top spot. They did so with a game to spare. So they're actually on a long haul to Perth this weekend to play the Force. It doesn't really matter to them necessarily the result, so they've left some players back to have the long weekend with family. Some of those players that maybe have put in a little bit more of the workload over this time. For the Crusaders, they're currently in 2nd. They can't catch the Chiefs, but they could drop to 3rd with a big loss to the Hurricanes. For the Canes, they could still leapfrog the Brumbies and make it an all-New Zealand top 4, which would get them a home semi-final as well. But they again would be relying on the Brumbies losing to the Rebels later tonight, which is, you know, again on that scale of unlikely. So, yeah, as we're saying, there's still a bit to play for it, even as the competition's coming down to this last week.
I think I need that flow chart in writing, Felicity. Let's move on to this US runner who's been disqualified. What did they do in celebrating the win at the state championship that got them in the shtuck?
Yeah, it was a high school athlete that he got his school's 200-metre relay team disqualified from the Maryland State Championships. He anchored the relay team, and what got him offside with the officials was that he had actually raised one finger in celebration a few metres from the finish. Sort of did it in that way that, you know, athletes do it, not in a way that would be considered rude or offensive or anything. He was just celebrating, but his celebration apparently broke a National Federation of State High School Associations rule, which is an action which brings discredit to an individual or their school. I mean, if we translate this to the professional athletic environment, if you think about, you know, 100-metre super star Usain Bolt, he'd be down an Olympic gold medal because he did that cheap chest-beating dance as he went over the finish line in 2008.
Have you seen the video, Felicity, of this runner? I mean, was the finger raised in the bird-like position or something more neutral than that?
Oh, way more neutral than that. Way more neutral. You know,
gosh, that seems rough.
Well, I mean, he didn't have his arms out like an aeroplane, which the US women's sprinter Sha'Carri Richardson did. She won a 200-metre race a couple of weeks ago in Nairobi, and she did that about 30 metres before the finish. This young kid, he wasn't that far away from the finish line when he was doing this. And as you say, a little bit, I guess, hard. And as we asked Athletics New Zealand about it as well, and they said they acknowledged this ruling and that it was a strict interpretation of an international guideline, but they think it's a bit heavy-handed. They say displays of emotion aren't discouraged here because they see young kids doing it at club meets, right? You're running down the finish line, everyone likes to celebrate. So they want to see that kind of thing continue, and they won't be pulling anyone up for it.
Yeah, as long as you're not being too smarty pants, it kind of adds a bit of character to the event. Thank you for that, Felicity. That's our sports reporter, Felicity Reid. Let us know what you reckon of that. 2101 on text or tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. The government's $1 billion plus buyout scheme for flood-ruined homes has left some councils scratching their heads about how much of the tab they will be picking up and where the cash is coming from. The voluntary buyout scheme was unveiled yesterday. 700 Northland homes have been deemed Category 3, meaning the sites are too unsafe to rebuild on, following the Auckland anniversary floods and Cyclone Gabrielle. 400 of those houses are in Auckland, but owners won't find out exactly who is eligible for the buyout until June the 12th. Now, Auckland's Deputy Mayor, Desley Simpson, joins us now. Kia ora, Desley.
Kia ora, Lisa. How are you on this Friday?
I'm very well, thank you, but I'm just wondering how much can Auckland Council afford to kick into this pot of buyback cash?
Well, considering the state of our finances, not a lot, if I was honest. But having said that, we are in multiple negotiations with government over this issue. I mean, I'm talking many, many times a week, every week. There are three questions I think are still needed to be clarified. One is, what is the criteria for valuation? In other words, how much are these homes worth? What criteria are you using around that? What is the split of costs between council and central government? Because, we haven't got a lot of money, but and we're absolutely incredibly grateful that they've put their hand up to help. So, we're really looking at what that split will be. There'll be some serious negotiation. Don't you worry about that. And then the last one's a bit of an interesting one. It's about the treatment of uninsured properties and where they fit in the scheme of things. So those are three big questions I think we still have to answer. But as I said, I'm grateful that they're going to help.
You're saying that there's lots of conversations going on, so can we read into that you disagree on where things should fall on those 3 points?
No, you cannot read into that at all. I'm just saying that those are the three important questions I feel need to be answered before we definitively, tell Aucklanders what the situation is. And I feel for them. Look, these are people that have been, left out of their homes for months now, and it's really important for us to ensure we have all our information that matches the government's new criteria, because when houses were initially deemed unsafe, there was a red sticker, a yellow sticker, a white sticker. We've now got a different set of criteria. They're categories, they're category 1, and there's a whole pile under 2, and then there's category 3. So since May 1, when the government came out with that new criteria, we have been analysing homes and properties so to move them from what we had into this new set of criteria. But there are, there's other multiple factors which aren't helping, and that is, whilst you might have a red sticker and the house beside you might not be red stickered, what is the state of the land? So it's a bit of a wider conversation. It's not simple, Lisa. It's not simple.
No, and as Deputy
But it's
Mayor...
important to get right.
Yeah, as Deputy Mayor, I'm wondering what you are comfortable with. Would you think a 50-50 split is reasonable, or are you looking for the government to pay more than that?
I would definitely be looking for the government to pay more than that. Look, the government is very well.
Do you have a figure in mind, Desley?
No, I'm not going to give you a figure. I don't. But the government is very much aware that we are about to pass a budget next week, of which this really wasn't factored into. So we now have to look on Thursday next week, when we're deciding on the budget, we've got to make sure that there is flexibility within what we decide on to actually cover whatever it's going to cost the ratepayers of Auckland. And, that makes me a bit nervous, but we've got to make sure we have some wriggle room in there.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you about the budget in a second, but also in terms of the valuations, what do you think is fair? Current CV?
Look, I'm looking into some, history from Christchurch and other places, but it may be, and I'm not saying it should be, I'm saying it may be, the rateable value prior, the last rateable value or something like that. I don't know what the discussions will end up. We have a recovery office. We have a person leading that recovery office that was involved in the post-Christchurch recovery work. He's very experienced in this field, and a lot of that negotiation is through him and his team.
Desley, I'm just wondering how the council is going to come to an agreement on a budget when you have a mayor that's referring to people as dipshits and financial illiterates.
I'm hoping that all councillors will come to the table on Thursday next week, committed to make a decision that lands a balanced budget that is in the best interests of Aucklanders. And I have confidence that everyone round the table will try and do that, absolutely.
Is it made harder when you got a mayor who's slinging that, though? Is it made harder, if you are honest?
It's not made easier. This budget's going to be hard. Anyway, this budget was always going to be hard. It is probably the most complex and detailed budget that we've ever done. And I say that to you, Lisa, having done a few. So I think it's going to be challenging for us all.
Have you had that conversation with the mayor face-to-face, Desley? It's suggesting that perhaps he'd like to tone down some of the language if he wants to get people on side?
I haven't seen the mayor today, no. I haven't seen him today.
Is he acting in a way that's befitting a mayor?
He could potentially at times use better language.
I think the pregnant pause says it all, doesn't it, Desley?
Yeah, TGIF.
Thank you. Really appreciate your time, Desley. That is Auckland's Deputy Mayor, Desley Simpson. It is 29 minutes to 6. Kia amo tonu mai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. It's time for the business news. Ko taku hoa e naine, ko Nona Peltier, who joins me now in the studio. What are we talking about, Nona? Oh, yes! IKEA.
You're excited, I can tell.
Well, I think some people will be excited, some people will hate the idea, but tell us what's going on with it.
Well, IKEA's broken ground at their Mount Wellington site. They're going to build a 34,000 square metre facility. It's going to have...
That sounds enormous.
It is. It's going to include 2 houses, like as if there was a house in there, a big car park, a food court, where they sell those Swedish meatballs, as you know.
It's to keep you in the building.
And also a food market. So big. And of course they have once you've decided on what you want, you have to go into the sort of factory and pick your ready-to-build item. So yeah, it's massive. If you've ever been to an IKEA, you'll know it's quite the experience. One way in and one way out. Mostly after you've been all the way through.
Yeah, it's a maze. There's no denying.
It's a maze. Okay, well, anyways, they're expecting the construction to begin now, to be completed by the end of 2025. But it's a big facility, so you would expect it to take some time, I guess. And once it's up and running, I guess people will be very excited because they won't have to order online anymore. They'll just be able to get whatever they want. Your dreams all come true at IKEA.
Yeah, well, we'll take that under advisement.
Yeah, right, okay.
Let's talk about Consumer in New Zealand. It wants the Commerce Commission to crack down on false and misleading environmental claims by business. So this is greenwashing, yeah?
Yeah, so they've taken aim at Air New Zealand over there. You look shocked. No, really. You know those cups they give you your coffee in and what have you? Mm. Well, they're biodegradable, but there's not very many places where you can send them to a composting facility within New Zealand. We don't have that commercially available in all locations, so the cups end up in the landfill, which means that they really are no different from a standard cup. However, Air New Zealand says it's not fair to tar them with the greenwash brush because they have all sorts of sustainable programs in place, climate emission mitigation. They've got they're looking at hydrogen fueled
planes, a whole raft of ideas that they have in place or looking to put in place. And they said they're also reviewing that waste management piece, which includes the cups, which were introduced in 2019. Now, the other thing is that the Consumer New Zealand is asking the Commerce Commission to investigate greenwashing claims and don't leave it up to consumers to point it out to them. Now, I've asked the Commerce Commission to respond, do they actually act on complaints? Have they received any complaints? Do they favour an investigation? But I haven't heard back from them. I'm sure we will in due course.
Okay, and you can fill us in when you do. Take us for a spin around the markets,
right,
please,
so the
Nona.
top 50 index, it ended down 0.3%. That was a drop of 35 points to 11,881. Now, the Kiwi was mixed, which I think is the more interesting story here in the markets today. And we finished up against the US at 60.9 US cents. So that's quite a recovery from where we were, which was like around 60 cents. Down against the Australian at 92.2 and steady against the British pence at 48.6. The reason why is that the debt ceiling issue has been resolved, so that's taken a peg out of the support for the US dollar. That's why the Kiwi rose against it. But at the same time, the Australians have got this new minimum wage, which is stoking the bets that the Reserve Bank of Australia is going to raise interest rates there, which supported the Australian dollar and saw the Kiwi fall somewhat against it. And that's all I've got for you.
Thank you so much, Nona. Ka kite, have a wonderful weekend. Nona Peltier there with Business News. Prime Minister Chris Hipkins has faced a grilling by University of Otago students during his trip to Otepoti today. Student staff and community members have been fighting against the university's request for staff to consider redundancies in a bid to save $60 million. But the students didn't keep their question to cuts alone. Tess Brunton has more.
It was a mixed welcome for Prime Minister Chris Hipkins at the Otago University, with protesters chanting and selfie requests. Associate Professor of Politics Brian Roper says staff are already finding out that their courses are being cut and they're losing their jobs.
I bumped into one of them. She was in tears. She was absolutely distraught. What this government is doing to our universities is scandalous. 5 out of 8 of them are currently experiencing severe financial difficulties because of the chronic underfunding of this government.
Chris Hipkins says declining enrolments means universities across the Motu are finding ways to rebalance their books.
I know that's a really uncertain and uncomfortable time for the staff. The universities make their own decisions about how they manage their finances, so it's not something that we can intervene on as a government.
The Prime Minister attended a student association forum this afternoon, making a speech before opening the floor to questions.
So I was just in a lecture where we're doing course evaluations, and my lecturer was begging the class to give a positive evaluation to keep her job. We have a $60 million budget hole. Why can't you just fix it?
Chris Hipkins says there's a lot of demand on the government's coffers and they can't cover all the requests they get. He offered no policy promises, telling students they'll hear them well before the election.
Our rent has increased. The university's firing down. I'm just thinking, why on earth should I be voting for you?
I'll probably give you the most political answer I've given you so far. The biggest increase in tertiary funding that we've seen in 20 years in this year's budget versus a government that actually wants to do the opposite of that.
But his responses in regards to the National Party didn't go over well.
Why can't you just do what you say you're going to do instead of just shoving blame over to them?
Well, because there's an election and people will have a choice in the election, and I think they deserve to know what the choices that they have are.
Give us your policy then.
Not what's National not going to give us, what are you going to give us?
Yeah, well, you'll see that well before the election, don't worry.
A yellow-suited monkey has become a feature of recent university protests. They want the government to bail out the university to save jobs and courses.
He's cutting BAs, and I have a banana addiction as a monkey, but my Bachelor of Arts is being cut, and I think that's appalling. Millions and millions of dollars are sitting there, which could bail out our university for underfunding, but he's just not spending it, so he needs to.
Earlier in the day, Hipkins visited 3 gaming development studios after announcing $160 million to set up a 20% rebate for game developers in the recent budget. Balancing Monkey Games co-founder Sam Barham is hopeful the rebate could help them hire more staff and continue to do what they love. Currently, he says developers make most of their money straight after releasing a game and then live off that until they release another one.
It makes a huge difference in terms of our ability to survive. You know, it's not the least risky business out there, so we've got to think about, you know, how do we keep going. Our main aim is to still be doing this. It's a thing that we love doing.
The details of the rebate will be consulted on, but up to $3 million in rebate funding is likely to be up for grabs per year for individual studios.
And let's return to Kaikohe now, where police have just held a media briefing after an elderly woman died following a home invasion last night. Our reporter Emma Stanford is there. Emma, what have police had to say?
They haven't been able to give away too many details, Lisa, but they are telling the public that they're looking for an offender who was last seen running away from the scene barefoot. The offender has left some shoes behind at the address and another item of clothing. Now, police won't say what those shoes look like or what the clothing looks like, but they are hoping that someone in the Tarariri Street area may have seen a person running away barefoot about 11:40 last night.
And in terms of that timeline, Emma, can you just give us a bit more detail? When did this all start to unfold? When did the police get the call?
Police got the call about 11:30 to reports of an intruder in a house. And it's then, now it appears the offender has run off with bare feet at about 11:40. And then after that, we don't know, but it does appear that the woman was helping a family member in this alleged scuffle at the house, and she has since passed away from her injuries.
And what more do we know about the victim?
Really nothing. The police wouldn't give away any details. They said it is up to the coroner for the coroner to do their investigation, and then once that has been done, police will be they'll be able to identify the woman and any more details. But what we do know is that she is an elderly woman who is very treasured by her family and by the community.
And you've been in the area today. What's been happening at the house and in the neighbourhood?
Yeah, so they did have the police tape up at the driveway. The street wasn't cordoned off, but there was a heck of a lot of people driving past, rubbernecking, having a good nosy at the scene. There was blue forensic tents up at the house as well. I did go into town and talk to some residents, and they said that, you know, Kaikohe is actually a really great community and they love living there, and it's sad that this incident has happened, and they hope that people didn't think of the community in a bad light after this homicide.
Thank you for the update. That is Emma Stanford, our reporter there, covering that case involving the death of a Kaikohe woman following a home invasion. It is 18 minutes away from 6. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Homai o whakaaro, we would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the program this evening. Don't forget you can get in touch via text 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, and the email address is checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Evie is standing by with the headlines. Anea Evie, mena pita pita kōrero.
An elderly woman on a dialysis machine was killed in a home invasion in Kaikohe late last night, and the police have launched an investigation. The police say the woman died after attempting to intervene in a struggle between an intruder and other people living at the house. A person seen running away is being sought. Auckland Mayor Wayne Brown has again raised the hackles of councillors by forwarding them copies of emails, including one in which the sender calls them, quote, dipshits. Yesterday, Mr Brown called some councillors financial illiterates, and Deputy Mayor Desley Simpson told Checkpoint tonight there are times when the Mayor could potentially use better language. The minimum wage in Australia is to be raised by 5.75% from July the 1st. The lowest paid will now get at least $22.61 an hour or $24.56 in New Zealand dollars. People in southern and eastern China who have already sweltered through May face more weeks of unrelenting heatwaves, putting power grids under strain as demand for air conditioning soars. In the next 3 days, most of southern China is expected to be hit by temperatures of more than 35 degrees. And Police Commissioner Andrew Costa has revealed that 5 electric cars will be trialled on the front line in a bid to reduce carbon emissions. At a cost of $1.7 million, the BMW i4s will be tested in 5 different regions. Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic in Canterbury on State Highway 7 at Island Hills, a serious crash by Shale Peak Stream Bridge has closed the road between Springs Junction and State Highway 778 Hanma Springs turn-off. Our next news and weather is at 6.
Ngā mihi, Evie, and as you heard there, the New Zealand Police have revealed their new electric patrol car to be trialled on the front line. Police vehicles make up 20% of the government's light vehicle fleet, which produces 56,000 tonnes of carbon emissions a year. This move is part of a wider trial to reduce emissions by 176 tonnes. Reporter Louise Tenuth and camera operator Nick Monroe went for a spin.
The future of police patrol cars electrified. Police Commissioner Andrew Costa, along with manager for the Police Fleet Service Group Brian Yanko, revealing the BMW i4 as the chosen vehicle, with a price tag of $109,000 each. He was quick to stress the vehicles were not chosen for their branding, but because they met crucial criteria.
We have some particular requirements around range, around the ability for the vehicle to take the kit that we have to carry, around the core performance of the vehicle. So when we were looking for the most suitable vehicle, the BMW i4 was where we landed.
At a cost of $1.7 million, 5 cars will be trialled by roading patrol officers over the next 6 months. Starting in counties Manukau before heading to central districts, Christchurch and Dunedin, testing different terrain and weather conditions. The question on everyone's mind, how long does a charge last? 590 kilometres, with the average shift covering up to 500 kilometres. As part of the trial, chargers at stations will be installed, but public chargers could also be used. With around 120 kgs of equipment, like a firearm safe, lights and sirens, along with passengers and high-speed driving, this puts a strain on battery life. Brian Yanko says that's something they'll be closely monitoring.
We can sometimes see, even in our petrol fleet, we'll see a reduction in performance of around about 27%. It is larger within the EV, but we need to get a better understanding of what that degradation looks like.
Things like headroom for potential arrests were also considered when making the decision. With recent extreme weather events leaving many areas without power, having EV cars ready to go 24/7 in the future could mean looking at other options like alternative fuel.
The infrastructure requirements for us to run a resilient electric fleet would be very significant. So there's a lot of questions still to be answered. This is the first step in that journey. Clearly there are other vehicle technologies that could become relevant in terms of alternative fuels, so we need to keep a close eye on how this is unfolding as this area is moving very quickly.
The car well and truly fulfills the need for speed, with the ability to go from 0 to 100 kilometres an hour in just 5.7 seconds. Checkpoint went to test it for ourselves.
This will be a perfect fit for road policing and highway patrol for that very reason. There's no delay in downshifting gears or having to change gears. It's a single continuous motion and full power at all time. The way that the vehicle like this changes speed is quite different.
Right.
So we'll head on out.
Vehicle and Equipment Specs Coordinator Ian Whitfield is part of the team that's been putting the pedal to the metal over the last year.
I've kept it on its wheels. Does that count?
Yeah.
We've been through quite a bit of testing. This particular vehicle we've had for some time. It's only recently had the fit out completed, and gives us the opportunity to do the last phases of testing before we've released it today.
If the trial is successful, more EVs will be purchased in a bid to reduce the carbon footprint on the front line.
It is 12 minutes away from 6. Kia amo tunu mai. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. If you were listening to that story from Louise on radio, do check out the video version filmed by Nick Monroe. We'll put it on our webpage. The social media influencer Andrew Tate, who's being investigated in Romania for rape and human trafficking, has told the BBC he rejects the allegations. In his first major interview since he was released from police custody in April, Mr Tate denied fueling a culture of misogyny. He dismissed testimonies of women who have accused him of rape and exploitation. The BBC's Lucy Williamson reports.
Andrew Tate has built his image around cars, cigars and controversy. His followers swallowing his sexism along with his success.
No, I'm innocent.
He said little in public since his arrest in Romania 5 months ago for rape and human trafficking. Today, the BBC was the first major media outlet to challenge him on those allegations and on concerns from police, schools and rights organisations that he's spreading misogynistic attitudes among boys and men.
Andrew Tate.
Hello.
Have you raped anybody?
Absolutely not.
Have you trafficked anybody?
Absolutely not.
Exploited any women for money?
Absolutely not.
But you have admitted using emotional manipulation to get women to work in the webcam industry for you.
No.
The BBC has spoken to somebody since your arrest who says exactly those things, that with you it's all manipulation, there's an ulterior motive to everything you do.
Is this Sophie? Oh, it's Sophie, the fake name, no face. No,
I was so intent on wanting to please him and wanting him to be happy that I was just kind of, yeah, okay, do whatever you want.
And what is she accused? Has she accused me of a crime, this imaginary Sophie?
She's making the point that there is
she accused me of a crime?
Emotional or psychological manipulation.
I've asked you a question and I've allowed you into my house.
I'm asking you a question.
Correct, but you're not the boss here because I've allowed you into my house.
I'm asking you the questions.
Correctly, and I'm telling you.
You get to decide the answers.
No, we're equal here. I've allowed you into my house. You don't come here with a position of authority. I'm doing you the favor as legacy media, giving you relevance by speaking to you. And I'm telling you now, this Sophie, which the BBC has invented, which there's no face of, nobody knows who she is.
The BBC did not invent her.
Of course not. And because you never invent anything.
We've got the chief executive of Rape Crisis naming you individually as spreading a dangerous ideology of misogynistic rape culture.
Absolute.
It's the comments you make that are leading people to say things like this.
Absolute garbage.
National organisations who are saying that are blaming you for increasing levels of misogyny. Schools that are saying they are having increased incidents of girls being attacked, of female teachers being harassed.
If that was
by
true,
pupils, because of you and your teaching and your influence.
That's absolute garbage. I have never, ever encouraged a student to attack a teacher, male or female, ever. I preach hard work, discipline. I'm an athlete. I preach anti-drug. I preach religion. I preach no alcohol. I preach no knife crime. Every single problem with modern society, I'm against.
I've presented you with case after case after case, with quote after quote after quote of people who are genuinely concerned about the impact you're having, and you brush it off as if it's nothing.
No, what you have done is come here with an agenda. You've come here with loaded questions. You've come here with things taken out of context. You come here with things that you don't understand are satirical. And you expect me to say to that,
sarcastic and jokes.
No,
that's how you explain the comments you make.
For you to sit down.
Would you like to apologise for any of them?
For you to sit down and... For you to sit down and say that one woman said that her boyfriend watched an Andrew Tate video and now he won't do the dishes, or whatever your argument is,
police,
and that I'm somehow the worst, most dangerous man in the world because I have a car, is just disingenuous.
Andrew Tate's arrest and detention haven't dented his influence. He's followed by media to the prosecutor's office, followed by millions on Twitter. An indictment in this case, expected here within weeks, will mark a new phase in his fight with Romania's legal system, as teachers across the UK continue to battle his message.
And that report was from the BBC's Lucy Williamson. Some of your feedback here on our earlier interview with the Deputy Mayor of Auckland, Desley Simpson, and this is on the voluntary buyout of houses that are too unsafe to rebuild in flood areas. Louise says the payout options in Auckland for flood victims is going to be very interesting. Our RVs, rateable values, are very high, and certainly sellers at present are getting nowhere near RVs. Very interesting, she says. And Gay's got in touch to say, personally, I'm pleased with our Mayor's actions. Perhaps a bit rough and ready, but about time Auckland councillors acted like grown-ups and stopped wasting our money. Cheers, says Gay. This is on Wayne Brown forwarding emails in which councillors were referred to as dipshits and also calling them financially illiterate. On the other hand, someone else has got in touch to say, wow, talk about throwing Wayne under the bus. Of course, as Wayne doesn't believe in buses, it probably won't hurt him that much. Thank you, Desley, for answering the media questions, that listener says. Do keep your feedback coming. 2101 on text, or you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. There's an udder way for cafes wanting to do away with single-use plastic milk bottles. An Aussie company has joined forces with a Waikato milk supplier, which is filling reusable milk kegs. The 18-litre kegs are aimed at the hospo industry that can churn through a mountain of plastic bottles in a year. The Udder Way founder, Ed Crick, joins us now. Kia ora, Ed. How you doing?
Yeah, really well, thank you, Lisa. How are you?
I'm well. How did you come up with this idea?
I started in Tasmania with 3 cafes and just saw the sheer amount of single-use plastic that we went through. 2-litre milk bottles that had a lifespan of, 2 or 3 minutes at a time. So tried to find a solution for it, and there was nothing available anywhere in the world, so we decided to make it.
So tell us about these kegs and how the system works.
So the kegs are designed to replace your traditional 18-litre milk crate. So traditionally your milk crate will hold 9 2-litre bottles or 6 3-litre bottles. So they're a similar size to those, so they fit into existing dairy infrastructure as well as fitting into your infrastructure in cafes and supermarkets and things as well. So it's specific size and shape.
Okay, so you've got one in front of you. So it's a big sort of whitish plastic container with a blue screw top, very wide blue screw top. And does the milk supplier come to you with that keg filled up? You use it and then return an empty, or what's the deal?
Yep, so it's the milk supplier. We're partnered with Green Valley Dairies in North Waikato, and so they fill the kegs up with milk. It'll go to the cafe or restaurant, food service, be used and then sent back to the dairy to be cleaned and sanitised and then reused again.
So they're responsible for sterilising the containers, because the first thing that came to mind, I have to say, Ed, was icky.
Oh, absolutely. And that's with milk and reusable, reusable products, it's always been the issue. So this is internationally HACCP approved, and we've been through a lot of testing and everything to make sure that that's all tickety-boo.
Okay, so what about the manoeuvrability of that? Because that is 18 litres, so it's going to be heavy. And I'm just wondering how that works with the cafe infrastructure. Normally people, if they're making your flat white, as we have here, they pour your milk into a jug and then zap it and all the rest of it. So how user-friendly is having an 18-litre container?
Yeah, so from a weight point of view, it's the same. It's actually slightly lighter than your current milk crates. So it's fine from that point of view. And then from usability in a cafe, it actually provides a workflow solution in that it hooks up to a tap that goes onto your bench, and that's simply pumped out into your coffee jugs and steamed. So you're not constantly bending down, pulling out a 2-litre bottle, taking the lid off, tipping it, or leaving that 2-litre bottle on the bench as well to get warm.
So you're working with a Waikato company. What are your plans for expansion? How easy is it to get people to switch on to this idea?
In New Zealand, so we have another dairy partner in the South Island down in Invercargill, It's relatively easy. It's hard. It's been hard for us to get across to the big guys, the Fontieras and the Goodman Fielders of the world. Obviously, those beasts don't move fast. But it's definitely, I think we've got 16 dairy partners across Australia and New Zealand now, and close to 600 cafes and supermarkets using this system.
Ed, we're almost out of time, but there is two things I want to get some quick answers to. Is it cost effective? How much more will it cost me to have an 18-litre keg to fill?
The milk price should be pretty much the same. That's depending on the dairy provider. So we don't set the milk price. That's still set by the dairy provider, but
the keg service then? The keg itself?
No, that's between us and the dairy.
Okay. And
so the upfront cost of the tap, for the retail, for the food service customer. Yep.
Understand. And then how many disposable milk bottles do you think you are saving in a year if a cafe uses it? Have you got an average?
Yeah, so average cafe will use between 7,000 and 10,000 plastic milk bottles a year, each cafe.
That is fantastic. Thank you so much for your time, Ed. That's Ed Crick, the Udder Way founder. 18-litre kegs instead of using thousands and thousands of milk bottles. What do you think of that idea? 2101 on text. Let us know your thoughts. Emmett's got in touch about the dirt bikes. There's crackdown on them this weekend. Some of them have been swarming the streets of Auckland. Emmett says the heyday of dirt bike mayhem was the mid-70s. Wheel stands down the main street of Howick was a common occurrence. Wow. There were some amazing riders who weren't shy about putting on a show. Maybe they need to go to a track, Emmett, rather than using our roadways. Police are going to be out in force, they say, using security cameras and the Eagle helicopter to keep an eye on them. Another person on Wayne Brown, why doesn't the actual Mayor of Auckland front up to the media? Surely that's part of the job, and surely he knew when he stood. Can't just avoid the bits of the job that he doesn't like. We all have that, and we are mature enough to do the mahi without calling people's names out.
RNZ News at 6 o'clock. Ngā mihi o te pō, talofa lava, good evening, I'm Evie Ashton. The police say an intruder at the centre of a home invasion homicide investigation in Kaikohe left the scene barefoot. The police are still searching for the suspect after a woman died following a struggle with an intruder in the Northland town this morning. RNZ's Emma Stanford says officers are appealing for sightings.
The offender has left some shoes behind at the address and another item of clothing. Now, police won't say what those shoes look like or what the clothing looks like, but they are hoping that someone in the Tarariri Street area may have seen a person running away barefoot about 11:40 last night.
The police haven't released any information about the victim, but RNZ understands she was elderly. Auckland Deputy Mayor Desley Simpson says Mayor Wayne Brown could potentially at times use better language. She told Checkpoint that Mr Brown's behaviour, calling councillors financially illiterate and forwarding them copies of emails, including one from a supporter that called them, quote, dipshits, hasn't made the budget process easier. Mr Brown wants councillors to agree to a sale of the council's Auckland Airport shares to help close a $325 million budget deficit. The Prime Minister says the government can't intervene and stop the University of Otago from cutting staff. The university says several hundred employees could be laid off because of falling enrolment and the need to save about $60 million. That's prompted protests and calls for the government to step in. Speaking to students in Dunedin today, Chris Hipkins said declining enrolment means universities across the motu are finding ways to rebalance their books.
I know that's a really uncertain and uncomfortable time for the staff. The universities make their own decisions about how they manage their finances, so it's not something that we can intervene on as a government.
The university says it's unlikely it can make the required savings without cutting staff. The police formally warned Cabinet Minister Jan Tinetti for breaching electoral advertising rules during last year's Tauranga by-election. On polling day, Ms Tinetti's campaign team made social media posts encouraging people to vote for her in breach of the rules. Here's political reporter Katie Scotcher.
The posts on Ms Tinetti's Facebook page, which were removed within an hour, were flagged with the Electoral Commission and then referred to police. The police say the breach didn't meet the threshold for prosecution, so a formal warning was issued in November last year. Ms Tinetti says she apologised at the time and has taken steps to prevent it happening again. National leader Christopher Luxon is questioning why Ms Tinetti didn't tell the public and wants to know if she informed the Prime Minister.
The Jehovah's Witnesses Church says it should be exempt from the Royal Commission of Inquiry into Abuse. It's filed an application with the High Court for a judicial review to declare it's outside the inquiry's scope. It says this is because it does not and never has taken children, young people or vulnerable adults into care. The church says it's been telling the Commission this since 2019, but despite repeated requests, the Commission has failed to present valid reasons as to why it disagrees. Hence the High Court application. A spokesperson for abuse survivors says the application is a kick in the guts. The US Senate has passed bipartisan legislation backed by President Joe Biden that lifts the government's debt ceiling, averting what would have been an historic first ever default. Senate Majority Leader Democrat Chuck Schumer welcomed the news.
For a long time, many Republicans in the House resisted. House Republicans were ready to take default hostage in order to pass a radical, hard-right agenda that never could have passed with the American people. So tonight's outcome is very welcome news for our economy and for American families.
Defaults would have happened on Monday without a deal. A man has been arrested after a shot was fired in Taupo last night. Police say a gun was discharged during a verbal altercation in the car park of a 4-square store in Rifle Range Road at around 8 o'clock. They say no one was injured. A 31-year-old man facing charges of possession and discharging of a firearm will appear in the Rotorua District Court tomorrow. The police in Northland are appealing for witnesses of a fatal 2-car crash on State Highway 14 last night. They say it happened at about 6 o'clock near the highway's intersection with Otuhi Road in Whiki Valley. Anyone with information is asked to call the free 105 phone number. Traffic is building up on roads heading out of the main centres as holidaymakers head away for the King's birthday weekend. Waka Kotahi says traffic volumes are heavier this afternoon and will be again on Monday when people return home. It's advising motorists to plan their journey if possible to avoid congestion. It says roadworks have been put on hold for the next few days. However, traffic management at project sites will remain in place. And Police Commissioner Andrew Costa has revealed that 5 electric cars will be trialled on the front line in a bid to reduce carbon emissions. At a cost of $1.7 million, the BMW i4s will be tested by roading officers in 5 different regions. Mr Costa says the vehicle was chosen because it meets crucial criteria.
We have some particular requirements around range, around the ability for the vehicle to take the kit that we have to carry. As I've noted, this is not about testing the BMW per se, it's about testing an electric vehicle in the police operational fleet.
Police vehicles make up 1/5 of the government's light vehicle fleet, which produces 56,000 tonnes of carbon emissions a year. That's the news.
This week on Music 101, we celebrate Habibi Funk, the record label who reissue Middle Eastern funk and soul music from the 60s and 70s. Tammy Nielsen performs with the APO. Auckland post-punk's Guardian Singles talk about their new album. And Samoan Aotearoa musician Anonymous picks his favourite songs on the RNZ mixtape. Music 101 with me, Charlotte Ryan, this Saturday from 1 p.m, right here on RNZ National.
And we're on air, online and on demand. You're back with Lisa Owen next on Checkpoint. Right now, the updated short forecast from Met Service to midnight Saturday. Northland, Auckland, Waikato, Coromandel Peninsula, Bay of Plenty and Taupo. Isolated showers becoming more widespread and heavier for a time this afternoon. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay generally fine. The odd shower possible this afternoon. Waitomotu Kapiti, including Taumaru Nui and Taihape. Fine spells, isolated showers north of Manawatu. Wairarapa and Wellington, also Nelson, Marlborough, Canterbury and North Otago, fine. Bulla, Westland and Fiordland, showers, some heavy with possible thunderstorms today, becoming isolated tonight. Rain developing in Fiordland tomorrow evening, possibly heavy. For the remainder of Otago and Southland, scattered showers, some heavy and possibly thundery about the south coast this afternoon, clearing elsewhere tomorrow morning. And for Kaikohe, Chatham Islands, cloudy periods, a few showers clearing this evening, then returning late tomorrow morning. The time is 7 minutes past 6. I'll have news headlines for you at 6:30.
Nā mihi, Evie. No mai hoki mai. This is Checkpoint. Ko Lisa Owen tēnei. An elderly woman on a dialysis machine has been killed in a home invasion in Kaikohe. Police were called to the Tairairi Street address at 11:41 last night, where they say the woman had died after attempting to intervene when family members were confronted by an intruder. Detective Inspector Rhys Johnston held a press conference a short time ago.
We continue our investigation into the death of a woman in a house in Kaikohe overnight. So we've got our scene examination underway. That'll take us a couple of days. We're going to take our time and do this very thoroughly. What I can tell you is there are a couple of items left behind by our offender at the scene. So they are of great interest to us. We're going to be forwarding them for forensic testing, some urgency. There's a pair of shoes left behind by the suspect. And another item of clothing. So our information at this stage suggests that the offender has been seen running away from the property about 11:40 p.m. last night and that he's barefoot. Now that's going to stick in the minds of anybody who was out there in Kaikohe last night, so we're very keen to hear from them.
Detective Johnston says whilst they are not naming the victim yet, she was well known in the community and her family is devastated after losing a vulnerable member of their whānau. They say the intruder broke into the house between 11 and 11:20 p.m. last night.
At this stage of the investigation, police are keeping a very open mind about who the offender is. We don't have a suspect name right now, but I can reassure you that we're putting every available resource into this investigation and I'm confident that we'll come to a resolution very soon.
While the Far North Mayor Moko Te Pania lives in Kaikohe and he joins me now. Tēnā koe.
Tēnā koe hoa.
Very, very sad for the whānau and the community. This woman was well known. Did you know her?
Yeah, I did know our whanaunga who has been killed last night. Just in passing, though, we are a very small community here in Kaikohe. I think there only be 1 or 2 degrees of separation between anyone who lives in our town. So, yeah, it's an incredible shock for us today.
Yeah, the details that the police have managed to provide are that potentially the offender broke into the house at 11 o'clock or went into the house at 11 o'clock last night and might have been in there for some 40 minutes. I'm just wondering, are people in the community feeling safe?
No, well, you know, we're pretty tough here in Kaikohe and do have like a very strong resilience in spaces like this, but I have to tell you there is real fear across our community right now and just trying to ensure that people are keeping themselves safe, you know, keeping their homes locked and just having a little bit of extra vigilance at this time.
You live pretty close to the area, right?
Yeah, I mean, anywhere in Kaikohe is only 5 minutes from the other end of town, but yeah, I do live just only a few streets over from Tairairi Street, so it is a bit of a closer shock to home, to be honest.
Have you been in the neighbourhood today?
Yeah, I did just pass by just to see how things were going, and obviously the police are still carrying out the investigations and that important work that they need to do so that they can ensure that we find the person who has done this and bring them to justice for our community and for the whānau that's been affected.
For people who aren't familiar with the area, what is the neighbourhood like?
Oh, it's a quiet street here in Kaikohe. The property itself is on the edge of town, so bordering farmland as well. And yeah, just full of really nice people.
So the farmland, is that back onto the property, Moko?
Yeah, it's adjacent to the property there on Tairairi Street, just on the edge of our township.
Because the police are obviously appealing for help from the public. This intruder has left the house, leaving behind some clothing and without shoes. How confident are you that someone's going to be found soon and the public are going to help with that?
Oh, yeah, I mean, the call is out there loud and clear to our community that anyone who has any information or maybe recalls anything, if they were out and about last night or again this morning, to please get in touch with the police to help them with their investigations. This is going to be incredibly important around, just that sense of security for us as a community, that someone isn't still out there. But if anyone does have any information or thinks they might have seen something, then the call is there to please reach out to our police and help them with their investigation.
Yeah, what sort of night was it last night? Wet, rainy, calm? I mean, would people have been out and about?
Oh, I mean, I think we have people out and about at almost any time of the day or night here in Kaikohe, so I'm hoping that there has been someone who may have potentially seen something. Our weather's kind of been on and off with hit and miss with rain as well, so someone barefoot who's running or fleeing the scene or anything like that, maybe that could have stuck in the mind, or someone could have maybe just thought, oh, I don't know that person, or what were they doing out about then? So those sorts of things do stick in the mind, and if anyone is thinking, oh, maybe I know something or heard something, then definitely please help out.
Moko, have you got enough police resources in your area?
Oh, no, we know that our local police do a phenomenal job with the resources they have. We do not have nearly enough police resource for us here in Northern. I have regular meetings with our Northern District Commander, our Far North Area Commander as well, and they do a phenomenal job, but obviously there isn't enough police resource to go around. I mean, up here we struggle with the type of police work they have to do. It doesn't leave, that much resource left over to be able to do the things that we'd like to see our police doing on a regular, like just walking the beat and things like that. But I just have to take my hat off to our Northern Police and the job they do with the numbers they have.
Kia ora rā e ho, thank you for joining us, and our sympathies to your community. That was the Mayor Moko Tepania, Far North Mayor there, speaking on the loss of a well-known local after a home invasion last night. Christopher Luxon hastily added a second session to National's Get New Zealand Back on Track roadshow in New Plymouth today as party faithful spilled out into the car park of the Plymouth Hotel. Hundreds of largely Pākehā aged 60 plus turned out to hear the National Party leader outline his vision for the country's future. Our Taranaki Whanganui reporter Robin Martin went along.
It was bumper-to-bumper traffic outside the Plymouth Hotel as the National Party leader's roadshow rolled into town. And it wasn't much more comfortable inside as the lunchtime crowd jostled for vantage points. Murray had seen Luxon before and wasn't prepared for the turnout.
Very, very surprised. I didn't think there'd be anywhere near this many people here. But, there's just cars everywhere. Gridlock outside.
It was so busy, in fact, he had to cool his heels at the bar and wait for the second session. Bruce and Margaret also didn't make the cut. Have you had to wait?
Yes.
Yeah.
Most popular show in town.
Excited to be here though?
Interested.
What are you hoping to hear?
Some positivity would be good.
Yeah, positivity
yes.
Number one, yes.
Yeah.
I'm sick of the negativities going on at the moment.
Also in a holding pattern was 30-year-old Tane Webster, almost certainly the youngest person at the event. What are you hoping to hear from Mr. Luxon?
That he'll put an end to co-governance and decrease centralisation of control that the Labour Party keeps pushing, and a lot of the disgusting stuff they're pushing in schools. Personally, I'm really opposed to it, and I think that all needs to stop too.
What are you referring to there?
Well, the gender ideology and the kind of sexual education that's on steroids, some would say.
Meanwhile, inside, National candidate for New Plymouth, David McLeod, was introducing the man of the hour.
Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Chris Luxon.
In an hour-long address, Christopher Luxon revisited some of the now familiar touchstones: government spending and centralisation, the cost of living crisis, housing shortage and the failing education system. But getting tough on crime got the biggest reaction.
We've got to restore law and order and personal accountability in this country, right? Because we have lost the plot of economy.
And then it was over to audience questions. Reese had gender issues on his mind.
It's about the agenda that's being pushed, and certainly the sexualisation of some of the aspects of the curriculum. Also the pushing of puberty blockers. You're a Christian man, you should be able to speak to that.
So the first thing I'd say is on the education side, look, issues of sexuality and stuff I think are issues for parents to talk about in their family and their kids. We want the teachers to focus 100% on, as I said, the basics of maths, reading and science.
Merv championed a return to offshore oil and gas exploration and found a friend in Luxon.
So Merv, first part of the question, oil and gas. We actually need gas in particular as a transitory energy source probably for the next 20 years as we make the transition to renewable.
Luxon was quick to point out, however, that National shared the government's desire to move towards a carbon-neutral economy. One woman's gripe about children having to learn te reo didn't get Luxon's approval.
I appreciate many in this room haven't learned te reo. I personally am trying to learn because I actually want to learn. It should be up to me to be able to do that.
Those piling out of the first session were mostly happy enough. Jenny liked what she heard.
Most definitely.
What were some highlights for you?
Just the reassurances that the national government were going, if they get in, are going to get back to good policy, get rid of all the bureaucracy that gets tagged in with everything.
John was nonplussed.
No real highlights. He's saying all the things I've been hearing before and all the things I expected him to say. He's going to get the government out of running the country, running businesses, should I say, and get them being a government.
Edna was pleased enough.
He was good, yep. He didn't answer some of the questions, but I thought he did very well.
While Peter had spotted a problem.
I have a concern, though, that there's an apathy amongst the youth. And looking at the average age of the audience, you're preaching to the converted, and I really want to see our young people being more engaged and getting them to vote and understand the issues and them taking ownership of those problems, not just us.
The next stop for National's Get New Zealand Back on Track tour is Auckland's Takanini on Friday.
It is 18 minutes after 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. A Malaysian climber's been rescued from the so-called death zone on the summit of Mount Everest. The rare high-altitude rescue was carried out by two Sherpas who lowered him down hundreds of metres and then carried the man back to base camp. CNN's Isa Soares reports.
At the ominously named death zone of Mount Everest, during one of the deadliest climbing seasons on record. Nepali guide Gelji Sherpa carried out a rare and almost impossible rescue mission. It was midnight when he saw a Malaysian climber clinging to a rope, shivering in freezing temperatures, just over 1,100 feet away from the 29,000 feet high summit. The air too thin for humans to breathe and for helicopters to land.
It was important for us to rescue him, even from the summit. Money can be earned any time. Left like that, he could have died. We have saved his life by quitting the summit.
Gelji convinced his client to abandon their summit climb attempt so they could save the Malaysian climber's life. Gelji wrapped the stressed climber a sleeping mat and hauled him down with another guide's help.
We had brought him down from Camp 4, carrying him on our backs, because dragging was impossible. It took me 5 to 6 hours to get from 8,500 meters to 7,900. It was very difficult.
From there, a helicopter lifted the climber down to base camp. The favourable spring weather is gradually turning even more unpredictable due to climate change. 11 people died on Everest in 2019, a climbing season that saw unprecedented traffic and long delays in the same death zone near the summit. This season, Nepal issued a record 478 climbing permits. So far, 12 people, including an American, have died, the highest number for 8 years, and another 5 are missing. The unidentified climber was put on a flight back to Malaysia last week. Thanks to Gelji, his name was kept off the list of the mountain's victims.
Australia's most decorated living soldier has lost a defamation case against 3 newspapers which had accused him of committing war crimes while serving in Afghanistan. Ben Roberts-Smith sued the papers after they alleged he was involved in the murders of 6 unarmed prisoners. But the judge in the civil trial found that 4 out of the 6 allegations, all of which Roberts-Smith denies, were substantially true. The BBC's Robin Bryant reports.
He was an icon in his own country, a war hero honoured by the head of state, no less. The Victoria Cross on his chest, testament to Ben Roberts-Smith's bravery. Australia's highest military honour was given to him in 2011 for single-handedly overpowering Taliban machine gunners.
The Federal Court of Australia is now in session.
But a court has now ruled that newspaper reports of 4 claims of murder during his time in Afghanistan were substantially true.
The applicant's conduct and actions on the mission to W108, as found, means that the respondents have established the substantial truth.
The trial was a first of its kind in Australia. It centred on events during 2009 and 2012, as Australia's military continued its role in the Allied effort to try to defeat the Taliban. It heard claims he'd pushed a handcuffed farmer off of a cliff, details of a captured Taliban fighter who was shot in the back 10 times, and that he'd ordered 2 killings as an initiation for new recruits.
Today is a day of justice. It's a day of justice for those brave men of the SAS who stood up and told the truth about who Ben Roberts-Smith is, a war criminal, a bully and a liar.
There was a crowd outside, but Roberts-Smith wasn't in court to hear the ruling. He denied all 6 murder claims against him, saying 5 were lawful, the other didn't happen. This was a civil trial. It's not criminal. The burden of proof is lower. But the man seen by many Australians as the embodiment of heroism now has a much tarnished reputation. The newspapers who exposed him vindicated.
To Israel now, where tensions are high at the start of the country's LGBTQ Pride Week, which began with the Jerusalem Pride March. It's the first time an event of its kind will take place since the most hardline and religiously conservative government in Israel's history took power 5 months ago. Israel's police minister, Itamar Ben-Gvir, was jeered at by marchers who accused him of trying to push them back in the closet. The BBC's Tom Bateman was at the march.
The theme of this year's Gay Pride in Jerusalem is tolerance. Now, there is a very specific reason for that, and that is because this is the first Gay Pride in Jerusalem since Israel elected its most right-wing, ultra-nationalist government in the country's history, and a government that includes openly homophobic ministers, senior ministers, some of whom lead far-right parties. Now, one of those people is Itamar Ben-Gvir. He's the police minister in Israel, so he is actually responsible for the safety of all these people. He's overseeing the police operation. Now, he's somebody with a homophobic track history. He, in the past, has attended counter-protests to Gay Pride. He arrived here a few minutes ago. He walked down the street here with his security detail. There were cries of shame from the crowd. We caught up with him. I asked him if what he was doing was a provocation. He denied that, but it gives you a real insight into why there is such a sense of tension this year. And the other reason is because there's been a lot of activity on Telegram, social media, in the run-up to this from far-right ultra-nationalist groups, particularly one called Lehavar, which tries to prevent relationships between Jews and Arabs. It is an openly homophobic organisation as well. Now, some of their demonstrators have a counter-protest, which is over here. If you turn this way, the police have completely separated these 2 events. Now, I'd say there's only about a couple of dozen people over there. We were just over filming them. I asked one of them why they were there, and they were talking in very biblical terms about why they disagree with all of this. But Jerusalem always has extremely high tensions when it comes to this event. This is a holy city with the world's 3 monotheistic religions here. We've actually seen Christian fundamentalists campaigning or protesting as well about this. And since 2015, when an ultra-Orthodox extremist stabbed to death a 16-year-old marcher, he was in prison, but there has always been very high security. Why this entire event is sealed by the police. Everyone's screened before they're able to get in. But it is in that context of an unprecedented clash this year between secular Israelis and national religious Israelis who support the government. In that climate, the organisers had said they wanted a huge show today. They wanted record numbers of people here.
And finally tonight, a bunny cafe is under fire after an animal rights organisation claimed the owner is exploiting rabbits for money. The organisation claims the rabbits are frozen in fear from too many strangers patting them. But the cafe owner argues he's saving the animals and several have been adopted. Jasmine Veal reports.
Hi guys, welcome to the Bunny Cafe. Do you guys want to pick some bunny ears?
Step into a world of fluffy wonder, the website says when you enter the Bunny Cafe.
You guys ready? Let's go through here.
Kevin Gruszkowski is the 23-year-old founder and owner of Joy Grab, a company he started to create interactive experiences. This is his first concept, which opened a month ago on Ventura Boulevard in Woodland Hills, charging people $25 an hour.
They could get some drinks, some coffee and tea, and they're able to pet the bunny. The goal of this event is to educate people about bunny adoption and to find many bunnies homes.
He says he's had thousands of visitors already, and 10 of the bunnies have been adopted that he's rescued from LA shelters. But some rabbit rescue groups are furious he's been allowed to do this.
Anger is probably the word that comes first.
In fact, the president of the Bunny World Foundation showed up Thursday to check out the cafe for the first time.
No matter how much you polish it, it's still a torture chamber for animals who are literally frozen from fear.
Michelle Kelly with the Los Angeles Rabbit Foundation says they shot this cell phone video a few weeks ago showing a rabbit quivering with fear.
You know, this isn't about him. It's not. It's about the rabbits. He has to find some way to make money that doesn't exploit the rabbits.
LA Animal Services says that a pet shop permit was approved for this place and that they are monitoring the cafe and they have investigated the allegations. Their last inspection here was a week ago.
We've heard many allegations from that, and what I like to say is come in, come see the happiness of the bunnies.
Gruszkowski says he is the one who feels attacked by these groups. Have any bunnies been harmed or died?
None of them have been harmed and none have died.
He says he even wants to expand his Bunny Cafe concept into art shows and free community movie nights.
Well, let's get to some of your thoughts before we head off on the subject of the milk kegs. This is to cut down on plastic waste in cafes and thousands of milk bottles being thrown away. There's some utterly good puns. This person says utterly awesome, utterly brilliant is another one. Fantastic news on the milk kegs. Brilliant young guy. Hope he creams it, says this person. And a shout out to Raglan and the Reese Hotel in Queenstown, who have been using milk out of kegs and pails for a few years now to cut down on their plastic waste. That's all we've got time for this evening. You can catch up on the program on Spotify, Apple or wherever you get your podcasts from. If you've got the weekend off, have a fantastic one.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Talofa lava. Good evening, I'm Evie Ashton. The police say an intruder at the centre of a home invasion homicide in Kaikohe last night left the scene barefoot, and they're confident